Funding for this video is brought to you in part by Book of the Month and from viewers like you. Thank you. This year I am trying to instill my own type of book buying ban. Forgive me, bookishly father, for I have bookishly sinned. What's up, punks, and welcome to video. My name is Allie, and today we're going to do a nice, sweet, and simple spring book haul. If you're new to this channel, around these parts we balance daily life alongside disability, celebrate mundanity, and read a whole lot of books. Before you comment, I will save your fingers the string. Yes, I do have a card to my local library, but I do not live in a country where English is a national language. Also, it is my job to read and review books on the internet.com. Also, this is my special interest. Books are what I collect, and also,
guess what? Grows the economy.
Let's not waste any more time. The first two books I'd like to haul are actually from today's sponsor, who is none other than Book of the Month, which is such a fun bookish subscription service. It introduces readers to new emerging authors and freshly published reads. Their team works night and day, vetting through hundreds of books to help us find stories that we're bound to love each and every month. They have the best price for new release hardcover fiction, and it's even better right now because this month you can get your first book from Book of the Month for just $5 using the code FLOWERS. And if you're in the US, this applies to their audiobooks as well. That's right, they have hardcover books and books you can listen to. But my personal favorite part is that we win the most when it comes to their skip policy, because you can skip any month for whatever reason whatsoever without being questioned, charged, or penalized. This month I chose the following two books. The first is The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mickey Brommer. This is a contemporary literary fiction which follows our protagonist Clover, who is a death doula in New York City, and it explores celebrating life through the taboo subject of death. I love this concept. It sounds like my kind of book. I also gave The Last Word by Taylor Adams a scoop. This is a thriller that follows our protagonist Emma, who experiences some disturbing incidents after posting a negative book review. The author is Taylor Adams, who wrote the book No Exit, which is a thriller that I read just a few months ago, and it was so good I literally couldn't put it down. Like when I needed to get up and get snacks, I was walking through my apartment like this because I needed to know what happened next. So I will be reading / devouring this one this month. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video, Book of the Month. Now let's do a rapid fire book haul of all the rest of these and also some that aren't even here yet. Let's go over the ones that I don't physically have right now. The first is The Adult by Bronwyn Fisher. Her pub date is May 23rd, I believe. My online order said she'll probably be here beginning in June. We shall see. Pre-ordering books in Belgium is often tricky, to say the least. But my patron pants are on. This is a queer literary fiction, and it goes without saying, this is one of the most iconic covers that I've ever seen. It's about a girl named Natalie who is in her first year of university, and she's struggling with understanding who she is, like we all are at this time in our lives. She makes friends with an older woman. She kind of falls into her world, and apparently there's a lot of lies involved from both sides. I don't know, it sounds so good. The next one is Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. This one was published early April, but for some reason I have to pre-order to get this copy because this is my favorite cover out of all the ones that are offered. Anyway, this one was nominated for the Women's Prize of Fiction this year, and it's apparently based on a real story about a French village that slowly collectively loses their minds and nobody knows why. The blurb says it's about a mass poisoning that took place in the 1950s, and through this story we see all of these events unfold through Elodie's perspective, who's a baker's wife. I have such a good feeling about this one because the concept really reminds me of the book Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, which I loved so much. I'm just such a slut for literary fiction. Up next we have Garlic and the Vampire and also Garlic and the Witch, and this is a cozy, cute graphic novel duology that I feel like has been on my radar for the longest time. I finally have them, or I guess I have the sequel. The first one is still on its way. It sounds so cute and whimsical and fun. Our protagonist is Garlic, who is a literal garlic ball. She used to spend her days tending to her garden, but now the vegetable folk have discovered that there is a vampire nearby and it is up to Garlic to confront him. I can safely assume that the sequel is the same kind of deal, but instead of a vampire, it's a witch. I'm sold. The next one that's not here yet is Ephemera by Brianna Lowenson. My online bookish friend Sierra recommended this one to me. She found it in a bookstore. She took a picture, she sent it my way, and I was immediately intrigued. It's a graphic memoir that's on the quiet side, takes place in gardens and greenhouses, and talks about mental illness, but through nature. And online it says that it's both lyrical and a quiet book about isolation and confusion and the fog of childhood. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and graphic memoirs are one of my favorite genres of all time. Plus, I just love reading books that people I like recommend to me, so no brainer. I then got the next 5 editions of Giant Days by John Allison. Like I said, I got 5 and there's only 3 here. We've got 6, 8, and 9, but 7 and 10 are on their way. I've read the first 5 so far. I can't wait to read more. These are just my go-to comfort graphic novels. They follow 3 friends in university and they just get up to hijinks, true shenanigans, and it feels like watching cartoons when you were a child. You've probably heard me talk ad nauseum about these, but if you haven't already, just know that this series bakes my beans. They have my stamp of approval. I'm gonna collect them all, Pokemon style. I feel so much more at ease now that I have some on my TBR shelf because they're such a great go-to when you're not in the mood to read. Maybe you're feeling down, maybe you're feeling unmotivated. Not only are graphic novels a great way to remedy that feeling, but this series is so good. The next one I don't have is Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. Now, I only knew this book for its chalky cover, but this is the one that's on its way to me, which is so funny. I'm obsessed. This will be baby's first David Sedaris, and he is infamous for his humorous autobiographical essay collections, and so that is what Me Talk Pretty One Day is. This is apparently his most popular out of all the books that he has published. It's not something that I would pick up on my own, but it was voted in my book club that I have with some friends back home to be our next read together, and honestly, I just love reading with them. We could be reading a refrigerator manual and I would be pleased as punch, so I'm confident I'm in for a good time no matter what. Okay, the rest I own physically so I can hold them and be comforted by their presence. Thank goodness. The first is Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector, translated by Giovanni Pontiero. Now, this is a classic that comes from Brazil, and I had never heard of it before, but I recently stumbled upon a TikTok or a reel or something, and it was this creator's list of favorite books ever, and one of their favorite books was one of my favorite books, and it was I Who Have Never Known Men, and I very rarely see that make anyone else's favorites list, so I trust their opinion. This one apparently is very similar to I Who Have Never Known Men. It's a non-conventional, existential, stream of consciousness type story that follows our protagonist from childhood to adulthood. It's like 200 or less pages. I'm psyched that this one was put on my radar. The next book was also from that list, and it is All's Well by Mona Awad. Now, this book has been recommended to me a lot, actually, because apparently it features a protagonist who suffers from chronic pain, which I'm always looking for more of. I was just a little bit hesitant to give this one a scoop because I've heard such a mixed bag of emotions when it comes to Awad's writing, but seeing as it was put on the same list as I Who Have Never Known Men, I felt more confident picking it up. Apparently, our protagonist gets into a life-changing accident, but what got me is that it apparently depicts societal's refusal of accepting or recognizing female pain, which is just interesting and horrendously relatable. Also, the cover is just to die for, in my opinion. Are you kidding me? Next, Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. This is another memoir, and our author draws from the Quran to make connections through her life of experiences, being both Muslim and queer. So we have a collection of essays from her childhood, to then immigrating to the United States, to then becoming the driver of her own adult life. I have heard nothing but good things about this one. It sounds so good. I'm stoked. Next, Momfluenced, Inside the Maddening Picture Perfect World of Mommy Influencer Culture by Sarah Peterson. Now, this is a nonfiction that is exactly what the title suggests. Now, seeing as I've been on the internet for a very long time, I've seen the rise and fall of family vloggers or mommy influencers. Of course, there are still a bounty of them, but what I've seen pop up a lot more is this discussion regarding the safety and consent of children that exist online. I have no idea what's right or wrong because, you know, I too enjoy wholesome family content from time to time. It's cute as f***. However, it can't be denied that there's a darker side to this online content, and so I'm intrigued to pick this one up and see what's been uncovered so far surrounding this fairly new phenomenon. Next, The Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. Now, I read my first Catherine Lacey with y'all in the Pocket Pages book club, which is the book club for this channel. I'll link it down below if you'd like to join us. But 2 years ago, we read Pew by this very same author, and I loved it so much, and I've been wanting to read something else by her together ever since. So we will be reading this one in September to honor the 2-year anniversary of discovering this book together. But this one is about a character named X who dies, and then her wife painstakingly starts to write the biography of her dead wife. I'm not sure. It's queer literary fiction, if you haven't noticed a trend in this book haul so far. The synopsis offers me almost nothing, and I'm a little intimidated, but I'm less intimidated because we're going to be reading her together. So, a contemporary epic that dives into grief and love and art. Sounds good to me. Next, Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austin. Y'all, I've been wanting to read this book forever. I have heard your pleas. I have heard all of you saying how great this book is. I'm ready to jump on the bandwagon. I was just so stubborn and I needed to have this cover. This one is, you guessed it, another queer literary fiction. Surrounding mental health themes, of course. What makes this one stand out to everyone, it seems, is the very painfully accurate depiction of how all-consuming anxiety is. I'm just so excited to finally have it and finally read it. When was this published? Because I've been wanting it ever since 2021. A whole 2 years. I'm impatient. Next, A Kind of Spark by Al McNichol. This one was recommended to me a handful of times because it features an autistic protagonist, which is so rare. I myself recently found out that I was autistic, and so I love finding books with this representation. They're few and far between. This is either a middle grade or a YA, pretty sure it's a middle grade, and our protagonist, who is also on the spectrum, is drawing parallels between the witch trials and her own personal experience. I'm so excited. Next, Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettle, translated by Rosalind Harvey. Another trend that emerges in a lot of these books that I have collected are books that feature themes surrounding motherhood, a complex experience that is being a mother, choosing to be a mother, choosing not to be a mother, and this one follows 2 friends who are recently faced with this new consequential life-defining decision, and one of them chooses to spawn offspring and the other does not. And so we follow both of their timelines. We see how they differ. It sounds so good. Next, The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. This is said to be a book of genre-defying essays and is overall a meditation on delight. Apparently, it's philosophical but simple. We cover the birds, the bees, the mushrooms, and the trees as we explore our connections to the world around us and are reminded to make room for delight in our daily lives. Is that not what we do here on this channel every day? It sounds perfect. I'm so excited. It sounds so spot on, and so naturally I couldn't read this one alone. We will be diving into this one in the pocket pages together in July. Next we have Fall by Ian Reid. This is one of his 3 horror books. I read and loved his first one, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and I also read and loved his most recent release, We Spread. In my opinion, he is just so good at mind-bending, psychological, realistic horror. This is the middle child of the 3, so to say, and it's a philosophical puzzle that follows an older couple who live a quiet farm life together. The husband gets taken away for some reason and is replaced with familiar company, whatever that means. I guess it's sci-fi as well as spooky. I don't know. I've learned to not ask questions regarding his books, but instead buckle in and enjoy the ride. So consider me seatbelted. Next, The Invisible Kingdom, Reimagining Chronic Illness by Megan O'Rourke. If you're not new here, you know that I am always looking for books that can provide me guidance regarding chronic pain and chronic illness. I suffer from frequent migraine attacks that seem to strike with no rhyme or reason, and trying to find answers to this pain with doctors has proven to be difficult, to say the least. So I'm just consistently on the hunt for wisdom, tips, understanding, representation from fellow sufferers. Within this one, our author connects her own medical experiences with a decade-plus worth of interviews with doctors, patients, researchers, and more. Sign me up. Next, Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton. I'm so afraid of this book. It made it to a lot of lists of best horror across the internet, but the person who sold me put the cherry on top of me wanting to read this book was The Hardback Hoarder. It made it to her favorite books of 2022. I guess we follow a hitchhiker who's trying to flee her past for some reason. Then she gets into a scuffle and she's abandoned in this weird place. She meets a boy with a tinfoil mask. I don't know. Another book whose blurb leaves me with more questions than answers, and honestly, spooky books with blurbs like that often leave me the most spookiest feelings, so I'm intimidated. I'm a big baby boy. The next book is the opposite of that. I haven't heard anyone talk about it, and it's The Suicide of Claire Bishop by Carmel Banaski. Apparently it's magical realism / historical fiction. It starts in the past with a woman named Claire whose husband gifts her the chance to have her portrait painted, and so she sits down to do just that. And when it's all said and done, the painter reveals what they have created, and instead of painting Claire sitting there, they have depicted her suicide. Fast forward to 50 years in the future, and a man finds this painting and becomes obsessed with it. I honestly have no idea what to expect with this one, but it has such a clever concept in my opinion. It dives into memory, mental illness, modern art, as well as the women's liberation movement that unfolded in the 50s and 60s. This is another book that I've wanted for months and months, but I specifically wanted this cover. So satisfying to finally have it. Oh my goodness. Speaking of covers, The Nursery by Sylvia Molnar. Look at it. Look at it. Are you kidding me? We've got another lit fic about motherhood, but this one is a debut. It follows a woman who's stuck in a maternal prison of sorts in her own apartment. She befriends her upstairs neighbor as she's faced with intrusive thoughts and a deteriorating sense of identity. Through this friendship, however, she's reintroduced to the pleasures of daily life. We've got a great psychological representation of postpartum depression. It sounds so good, and with a cover like this, we couldn't not. Next, The Postmortal by Drew McGarry. Now there's this fellow online horror bookish creator who says, now I haven't read the classics, but I have read, and then provides a short list of books with the strangest loglines you've ever heard of. He's got such unique recommendations, and with this one, we follow a man who's in a dystopic sci-fi future where the cure for aging has been found. But while he's on his way to get said cure, he is faced with a sea of diverse life-threatening complications. It sounds like Scythe by Neil Shusterman, but for adults and weirder. So excited. Reaching back into the non-fiction realm of things, we have The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. This is an investigation of the causes of illness and essentially blames our modern Western world for making us not only unhealthy, but preventing us from healing. I recently read Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price, and this book sounds like it's in a similar flavor as that book, but way more extensive. Within this one, we apparently not only detangle the myths surrounding illness, but it offers a compassionate guide to healing, which I don't know about you, but I need. It's a big one, but it seems really important as well. Now, the next few books we can blame Lena Norms for. And now she loved the book Pod, and I really didn't, and I loved the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and she really didn't. So are we even remotely literarily compatible? I don't know, but damn can she sell a book, and damn do I love her videos. So the first book that I bought because of her influence was Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. This is a historical literary fiction that follows a woman who teaches art classes as the world that she knows crumbles before her due to a freshly unfolding war. Lena described this one as a boiling frog situation, in a sense that the daily horrific occurrences that could unfold during any crisis are normalized so quickly because of how slowly they come on. This idea of humans being so capable of normalizing what you would never expect theme is seen in As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, which is one of my favorite reads from last year, and this book sort of sounds similar to that. This idea of finding pockets of peace while your whole life falls apart is one of my favorite things to see in books. This one made it on the Women's Prize for Fiction list, and so I'm just excited to join the bandwagon. I also picked up the Bandit Queens by Farini Shroff, and as you can see by the tab, I couldn't wait any longer and I already devoured this one. But I'll tell you what I knew about it before I read it. It's about a woman whose husband runs away one day. She doesn't know why, and then everyone in the village thinks that she murdered her husband, and instead of correcting everybody, she decides to go along with it. She thinks, I'm a little older, I live alone, maybe if I have some edge, people won't f with me, which seems to be going swimmingly, until a bunch of other women in the village approach her, asking her to help them kill their husbands as well. And so now she has to juggle her lie alongside the demands that they have for her. Such a good concept, and I get that this is not a book review, but a book haul. I'll just say that this book was so good. It was so good. We'll talk about it in a couple of weeks. I hate this cover though. It's giving Suicide Squad. I will be displaying it on my shelf like this. Much better. And the final Lena Norm's influenced purchase is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. Now, she absolutely tore this cover art apart in one of her more recent videos, and rightfully so. What is happening here? But she gave the story such high praise, so I disregarded my artistic preferences and gave it a scoop. I recently read something else by Mitch Albom, and so I'm looking forward to opening this one. It's apparently about an older man who is a wounded veteran, and he makes his living by repairing amusement park rides, but one day one of the rides kills him, and he then wakes up in the afterlife and has heaven explained to him by 5 different people. It sounds like my kind of book. I just love stories where it's a small, simple adventure and you meet a bunch of different people along the way, and those people teach you different stuff. It's giving The Alchemist, it's giving The Little Prince. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing, so thank you, Lena. Now, I recently read Uzumaki by Junji Ito, who is an infamous graphic horror manga creator. This was one of the most strangest reading experiences I ever had. I loved it so much, but I was nervous that I started with his strongest contender, and so I asked you all to share with me your favorite Itos, and I found a couple of them in a bookstore quite recently, and I gave them both a scoop. So we have Shiver and Smashed, both by Junji Ito. Now, unlike the other book that I read from him, these are both short story collections. This one includes 9 of Junji Ito's best short stories, and this one has 13 chilling nightmares. Every time I find something by him in a bookstore and I flip through, the art chills my bones. I'm so excited. Summerween is coming up. I am prepared. Now, speaking of picking up books from authors I've loved in the past, we have Your Silence Will Not Protect You by Audre Lorde. A few months ago, I read a collection of her poems called The Black Unicorn, and I enjoyed them very much. And so I've had my eyes peeled for another Lorde. This one popped up in a bookshop. It's gorgeous, it's pink, I couldn't not. This is apparently both poems and essays, so we've got a great little 2-for-1. Audre Lorde was a revolutionary Black lesbian activist of her day, and her work is beloved to this day, and rightfully so. Apparently each piece featured in this all have a connecting theme of how important it is to not stay silent when you need to speak up. Now, one of my favorite books from last year was Tomb of Sand by Gitanjali Shri, which is a fictional story about an older woman, and it got me thinking about how the whole lost girl in her 20s genre is so popular, and how it's also so crucial to read books from different perspectives, from different levels of life. And so I asked y'all for recommendations that feature older characters, and the book that was recommended to me the most, I would say, is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. Now, this is about a woman who's in her 80s whose husband recently died, which is much like Tomb of Sand, except she gets a job working night shifts in an aquarium and becomes best friends with an octopus. And apparently this book is a mystery as well, and the octopus knows things about her missing son. I truly have no idea what to expect, but it's one of my most anticipated reads of this year. Plus, the cover is so pretty. Look at the colors, look at the art. I'm in love. Speaking of books that feature older characters, we have Must I Go by Yoon Lee. Now, I recently read The Book of Goose by Yoon Lee, and while the story didn't flow as well as I would have preferred, what it did feature was how damn talented Lee is with words. And so I really wanted to give her another shot. I didn't know where to start because she does have a lot of books out there already, but this one sparked my interest because of that older protagonist, but also on the back it says, how does the past shape the future? How do we live in the face Case of the Unanswerable. Our protagonist finds a man's diary and starts to read it and annotate it. Have you read this one? Again, cover is so pretty. Now the next book I have literally heard nothing about, but I found it at Passaporta, which is one of my favorite bookshops in Brussels, and I'm slightly convinced that it's magic. It's where I found Lonely Castle Lemire, which is another book that I hadn't heard of before I read it. It's one of my favorites of all time. I have it tattooed on my body, so I'm just so much more open to trying new things when I'm in this bookshop. So I picked up Two Battersea Park by Philip Hensner, which is a story told in 4 parts. I believe none of our characters have names, and it follows these characters in a city who recently got an ordinance that declares that no one in the city can meet, touch, nor speak to one another. And it apparently reveals the intimacy and ignorance we have for our fellow neighbor. I opened it up while I was in the bookshop, and it seemed like it was written so beautifully and creatively. I have no idea if my brain is big enough to understand this one, but I sure hope it is. And the next book I got is Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Klobave. I've just been pondering a lot recently this long-lived familiar feeling of being everything and nothing all at once. And then I went to the bookstore and I saw this and I thought, you know what? I would love to read a graphic memoir about someone exploring these very same feelings. Representation is important and comforting and nice. We've got a graphic memoir. It follows Kobabe's life in exploring gender identity, trauma, and erotic gay fan fiction with friends. It sounds so good. If I can wait until June, it'll make such a fire pride read, but if not, I know I'm gonna love it regardless. Speaking of picture books, I got It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth by Zoe Thorogood. The blurb for this one offers almost nothing. I know that it's a graphic memoir, but I also know that it only takes place across 6 months. I also know that everyone who read this one seems to love it, and I want to know why so bad. The theme surrounding mental health and it being a meta-narrative kind of reminds me of the graphic memoir Marbles, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I'm assuming that this one, much like Marbles, will be relatable, informative, interesting, and well told. But I truly have no idea what to expect. Have you read this one? 2 more! The next is Health Communism by Beatrice Adler-Bolton and Artie Vierkant. Fun fact, Vierkant means square in Dutch. That's unrelated. This is a nonfiction about how capitalism poses the utmost threat to public health, and it's focused on how we shouldn't be associating our value of human life on one's ability to work or be productive. This one just seemed like such a great companion read to both Laziness Does Not Exist and The Myth of Normal, but Health Communism seems to be more on the theoretical, political end of things. It sounds so good. It's on the shorter side. I opened it up in the shop and fell in love after just the first few sentences, so I'm in for a very good learning time. I lied. Now there's 2 left. And speaking of health and the human experience, we have Poor Little Sick Girls by Ione Gamble, which is a memoir that explores how oppressive the wellness culture is, how self-love is a scam, and the health risks of hustle culture, and how all of that is the patriarchy's fault. That's what the online blurb says. And it just sounds like such a book for me. Like I said, love chronic illness representation, love hearing about people's experiences. Gamble was diagnosed with an incurable illness when they were just 18 years old, and then this book was written to dissect the experience of being a quote-unquote unacceptable woman in our current day of empowerment. A love letter to unacceptable women. I'm excited to read this one. And finally, we have All About Love by Bell Hooks. Now, in our last video, I read a poetry collection who dedicated pages and pages to how much Bell Hooks changed their life, and so after that I was convinced I needed to read something by Hooks. I picked up her most popular book, which is a philosophical meditation on love. I've already started it, as you can see by the bookmark. I like it so far. I can tell that I will be needing to read more from this author. So which book was your favorite by Hooks? Let me know. And that's that. Thank you so much for tuning in to my bookish confession. I hope I am forgiven for my transgressions. I would love to know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, spoiler free of course, or if you've added any of these to your cart because they piqued your interest much like they piqued mine. Have you bought any books recently? Go ahead and confess your bookish sins in the comments down below if you'd like. I love talking books with y'all in this cozy corner of the internet. If you would like to keep this cozy corner of the internet alive, friendly reminder that the Snaily shirts are up for pre-order for the next week or so. We have 2 designs right now, most shirt options going up to a 5XL. Support the channel and a bomb-ass charitable cause, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and if the shirts aren't for you, that's okay. I'll also link the Patreon down below. It's 100% because of the kind people on this website that I'm able to call this my job and create as frequently as I do. Thank you so much for being there. And also an extra special thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Remember, y'all, you can get a new hardcover fiction or an audiobook for just $5 using the code FLOWERS. That's the price of a coffee. $5. Don't miss out. I'm gonna go and edit this video so I can send it out into the void. And as always, thank you for clicking, thank you for caring, and thank you for being nice. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!